The day they took my grandchildren away from me started like any other quiet morning in my small Texas home. I was making pancakes, just the way little Emma liked them, golden and soft, when I heard the knock. It wasn't unusual for family to visit, but something about that knock felt cold. When I opened the door, my daughter stood there with a tight expression, and beside her was a man in a suit holding papers. I knew instantly something was wrong. "Mom," she said, not meeting my eyes, "we think it's best if the kids stay with us for a while." The words sounded polite, but the tone carried a finality that made my chest tighten. I stepped back, confused, watching as they walked in like strangers, not family. My grandson Jake ran to me, hugging my waist, but my daughter quickly pulled him away. "It's just temporary," she added, but she still wouldn't look at me. Within minutes, their bags were packed. Within hours, my house felt empty in a way I had never known. No laughter, no small footsteps, no bedtime stories. Just silence that echoed through every room. They didn't tell me the real reason, but I heard it later through whispers. They said I was too old, too forgetful, too weak to raise children. They said I was becoming a burden. What they didn't say, what they didn't know, was that every month, for years, I had been quietly paying for their private school fees. Every uniform, every book, every tuition payment came from me. I never told them because I didn't need praise. I only wanted my grandchildren to have a future I never had. That afternoon, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chairs, remembering how full they used to be. I told myself it was just temporary, that they would bring the children back. But deep down, something felt different this time. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment Jake's small hand slipped out of mine. It wasn't just a goodbye. It felt like something had been taken from me without warning. And for the first time in years, I realized I might have to fight for the only family that truly mattered to me. The next morning, I opened the drawer where I kept my documents, the ones no one had ever asked about. Inside were receipts, transfers, and letters from the school, all with my name on them. I ran my fingers over the papers, studying myself. If they believed I was weak, they were about to learn something different. Because love had kept me silent, but losing my grandchildren was something I could not accept. And for the first time, I began to plan. I would start with a phone call, then a visit, and if they still refused to listen, I would show them the truth they had ignored for years and take back what mattered most to me always. The next morning, I woke up earlier than I had in years, not because I had slept well, but because my mind refused to rest. The house felt unfamiliar, without the sound of cartoons or the soft creak of little feet running down the hallway. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long moment, studying myself before standing up. This wasn't the time to fall apart. If I wanted my grandchildren back, I had to be stronger than the version of me they believed I was. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple but neat outfit, the kind I used to wear to their school events. I wanted to remind myself of who I had always been to those children. Then I picked up my phone and dialed my daughter. It rang longer than usual. When she finally answered, her voice was distant. "Mom, I'm busy right now." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I just want to see the kids," I said quietly. There was a pause, then a sigh. "It's not a good time. They're settling in." Settling in. The words felt like a door closing. "I've taken care of them for years," I said, my voice trembling despite my effort to stay calm. "You can't just cut me out like this." Her tone hardened. "We're doing what's best for them." The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone, feeling something inside me crack, but I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I walked to the table and gathered the documents I had looked at the night before. Every receipt told a story they had chosen to ignore. Every payment was proof of the life I had helped build for those children. I placed them neatly into a folder, my hands steady now. If words wouldn't reach them, the truth would. By midday, I found myself standing outside their new house. It was larger than mine, modern and polished, the kind of place people dream about. For a second, doubt crept in. Maybe they really believed they were doing the right thing. Maybe I had been too quiet for too long. But then I remembered Jake's face, the confusion in his eyes as he was pulled away, and Emma's small voice asking if she would still see me tomorrow. That memory pushed me forward. I rang the doorbell. When my daughter opened the door, surprise flashed across her face, quickly replaced by irritation. "Mom, you should have called." I held up the folder. "I tried." "You didn't listen." She hesitated, then stepped aside just enough for me to enter. Inside, I could hear the children laughing somewhere in the house. The sound nearly broke me, but I held on. "I'm not here to argue," I said softly. "I'm here to remind you of something you've forgotten." She crossed her arms, defensive. "We haven't forgotten anything." I opened the folder slowly, laying the papers on the table between us. "Then explain this," I said. Her eyes moved over the documents, confusion turning into something else. Something closer to realization. And for the first time since they took my grandchildren away, I saw the beginning of doubt in her expression. It was small, but it was enough. Because doubt meant she was finally starting to question the story she had told herself about me. And that was where everything would begin to change from this moment on. She picked up the first sheet with a frown, her eyes scanning quickly as if she expected to find a mistake. "What is this?" she asked, but her voice lacked the certainty it had before. I didn't rush to answer. I wanted her to see it for herself. One by one, she flipped through the papers, tuition invoices, bank transfers, confirmation letters from the school. Each page carried my name. Each one told a story she had never bothered to ask about. "These are school payments," she said slowly, glancing up at me. I nodded. "Every term. For years." She shook her head, disbelief written across her face. "No, that's not possible." "We've been paying." She stopped mid-sentence, the realization hitting her before she could finish. I watched it unfold in silence. The confusion, the doubt, the uncomfortable truth settling in. "You thought you were," I said gently. "But every time you were short, every time something worked out at the last minute, that was me." She dropped the papers onto the table as if they had suddenly become too heavy to hold. "Why didn't you say anything?" she asked, her voice quieter now. I took a deep breath. "Because I didn't do it for recognition. I did it for them." The words hung in the air between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she looked away, pacing the room like she was trying to escape what she had just learned. "This doesn't change anything," she said finally, though her tone wasn't as firm as before. "We still think it's better if the kids stay here." That was the moment I realized this wouldn't be easy. The truth alone wouldn't be enough. I would have to show her more than just what I had done. I would have to show her who I really was. "Better for who?" I asked quietly. She stopped pacing and turned to face me. "For them," she replied quickly. "They need stability. Structure." I nodded slowly. "And you think they didn't have that with me?" She hesitated, just for a second, but I saw it. "You're getting older, Mom," she said, softer now. "Things change." I felt the sting of her words, but I didn't let it show. "Yes," I said calmly. "Things do change. But love doesn't. Care doesn't. Commitment doesn't." I stepped closer to the table, placing my hand on the stack of papers. "You see numbers here. Money. But what you're really looking at is years of showing up. Years of making sure those children had everything they needed." Her eyes flickered back to the documents, then to me. "I was there for every school meeting, every sickness, every bedtime story," I continued. "Not because I had to, but because I wanted to." She swallowed hard, and for a moment, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time: guilt. But guilt alone wouldn't bring my grandchildren back. "I'm not asking for gratitude," I said. "I'm asking for fairness." The room felt smaller now, heavier. In the distance, I could hear Jake laughing again, unaware of the conversation happening just a few rooms away. That sound reminded me why I was here. "Let me see them," I said finally. "That's all I want right now." She looked toward the hallway, then back at me, torn between what she believed and what she was starting to understand. And in that hesitation, I knew I was getting closer. Because the wall she had built against me was no longer as strong as it had been before. That evening, I stayed in the house longer than I planned, not to argue, but to observe. I wanted to understand what had changed in their minds, what fear or pressure had convinced them I was no longer needed. My daughter avoided eye contact, moving around the kitchen as if busy with invisible tasks. Finally, she spoke again, her tone less sharp. We just want what's best for the kids, she repeated, but this time it sounded like something she was trying to convince herself of rather than me. I nodded calmly. Then let's define what best means, I replied. She stopped moving. The children's voices echoed down the hallway, and I could hear footsteps approaching. Jake appeared first, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Grandma," he shouted, running toward me without hesitation. I knelt down and opened my arms, feeling his small body wrap around mine. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Emma followed, slower but smiling, and soon both of them were hugging me tightly. My daughter watched quietly, arms now lowered at her sides. "Can we talk?" I asked gently. She hesitated, then nodded. We moved to the living room while the children sat nearby, drawing on paper. I kept my voice steady. "I want transparency. If you believe I cannot care for them anymore, then show me why. But don't remove me based on assumptions." She sat down across from me, folding her hands. "It's not about assumptions," she said softly. "It's about safety, stability, planning." I leaned forward slightly. "Then why did you never ask about the payments?" The question lingered. She looked down, silent. "You thought I was struggling," I continued. "But you never checked. You decided without conversation." She finally met my eyes. "We were trying to protect them," she admitted. "That's exactly what I've been doing too," I said. "For years." The room grew quiet again. The children's laughter drifted in from the hallway, and this time, it didn't feel like something being taken away from me. It felt like something that could still be saved. "I'm not here to compete," I added. "I'm here to cooperate." She seemed surprised by that. Perhaps she expected anger, confrontation, or threats. Instead, I offered partnership. "If you want stability, let's create it together. I can help with schedules, school involvement, finances, whatever is needed. But I will not disappear from their lives." She took a long breath, and for the first time since the incident, she looked unsure of herself. Not defensive. Not dismissive. Just uncertain. And uncertainty was progress. It meant she was thinking beyond pride. It meant she was beginning to see that removing me had consequences she hadn't fully considered. When I stood to leave that night, I hugged the children again, promising to return soon. As I walked toward the door, my daughter followed me. "Mom," she said quietly. I turned. She hesitated before speaking again. "We need to talk more about this." I nodded. "We will." And for the first time in days, I felt something shift, not victory, not defeat, but possibility. The conversation wasn't over, but it had finally begun. Over the next few days, I did something different. Instead of demanding immediate answers, I focused on consistency. I called every morning not to argue, but to check in. I asked about homework, about meals, about routines. I offered help without pressure. Slowly, the tension began to shift. My daughter still kept her guard up, but she no longer avoided my calls. Sometimes she answered quickly. Sometimes she waited. But she answered. One afternoon, she invited me to attend Jake's school meeting. It wasn't an apology, but it was progress. When I walked into the classroom, I felt the familiar sense of belonging. The teacher greeted me warmly, mentioning how involved I had always been. My daughter stood beside me, listening carefully. For the first time, she saw proof that my presence was not interference, it was support. After the meeting, we sat in the parking lot. The air was quiet. She finally spoke without defensiveness. "I didn't realize how much you did," she admitted. I looked straight ahead, giving her space to continue. "I thought you were tired. I thought you needed rest. I didn't think about how this would affect them emotionally." Her honesty surprised me. I turned toward her slowly. "I don't need rest from love," I said gently. "I need inclusion." She nodded. That single word seemed to carry weight. Inclusion. Not removal. Not replacement. Inclusion. That evening, she allowed the children to stay overnight at my house. It was temporary, she said, but it felt meaningful. When they arrived, they ran through the door as if nothing had changed. Their laughter filled the rooms again. I prepared their favorite dinner and listened to their stories about school. It felt like healing in motion. Later that night, after they went to sleep, my daughter and I sat at the kitchen table where everything had once fallen apart. The same table, The same silence. But this time, the silence was peaceful. I was wrong about some things, she said quietly. I waited. I thought removing them from you would create structure. But I see now that stability isn't just about location. It's about emotional security. Her words were careful, sincere. I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. You were trying to protect them, I replied. That's what matters. Now we adjust together. She exhaled slowly, as if releasing months of tension. I don't want to lose you, she admitted. It was the first time she had said something personal instead of practical. You won't, I answered. From that night forward, decisions were made jointly. I remained involved in their schooling, but boundaries were respected. We created a schedule that balanced independence and family support. There were no more assumptions. No more silent decisions. The separation that once felt permanent slowly transformed into cooperation. Trust rebuilt itself through consistent action rather than argument. And though the journey was not perfect, it was moving in the right direction. For the first time since they were taken away, I felt not like a burden, but like a partner in their future. As the weeks passed, the atmosphere between us continued to change. The sharp edges of misunderstanding softened into conversation. My daughter began asking questions instead of making assumptions. She wanted to understand how I had managed the school payments for so long without complaint. I explained that love often works quietly, without announcements. I told her that sometimes the strongest support is the one no one sees. One evening, she asked to review the financial records together. Not because she doubted me anymore, but because she wanted clarity. We sat side by side at the dining table, going through each document carefully. When she saw the total amount contributed over the years, her expression shifted from surprise to gratitude. It wasn't about the money, but about the commitment behind it. I never knew you sacrificed this much, she said softly. I shook my head. It wasn't sacrifice. It was responsibility I chose. That statement seemed to resonate with her. She realized that I had never positioned myself as a victim. I had simply acted. Quietly. Consistently. Meanwhile, Jake and Emma adjusted quickly. They enjoyed spending time in both homes. Instead of feeling divided, they felt expanded, two spaces filled with care. I made sure their routines remained stable and their school performance improved because communication between us increased. One afternoon, Jake asked me directly why he had stayed away for those days. His question was innocent but honest. I explained gently that sometimes adults make decisions when emotions are high. I told him that families can misunderstand each other, but love can repair those misunderstandings. He listened carefully, then hugged me and said he was glad everything was back to normal. Normal was not exactly the right word. We were not returning to the past. We were building something new. My daughter eventually admitted that part of her decision had been influenced by outside opinions. Friends had suggested that I might struggle with energy or responsibility. Instead of discussing it with me first, she had acted quickly. That realization helped her understand how assumptions can quietly shape decisions without facts. She apologized sincerely one evening while we were preparing dinner together. It was not dramatic. No tears. Just honesty. She acknowledged that removing me had been premature and based on incomplete understanding. I accepted her apology without hesitation. Forgiveness, I learned, does not erase accountability, but it does open doors for growth. From that point, the focus shifted from conflict to collaboration. We established regular family meetings, discussing schedules, finances, school progress, and emotional well-being. The children benefited from consistency. The environment felt structured, but also warm. Neighbors noticed the change as well. They saw the grandchildren visiting frequently, laughing in both houses. They saw me involved in school events again. What once looked like separation now looked like unity. The greatest transformation, however, was internal. My daughter began to trust my judgment again. She no longer viewed me as fragile or outdated. Instead, she recognized experience as an asset. And I, in turn, learned that standing up for myself did not mean abandoning compassion. It meant ensuring respect while maintaining kindness. What started as a painful removal gradually evolved into a stronger family bond than before. Not because nothing went wrong, but because we chose to correct it together. By the time autumn arrived, our family rhythm felt steadier than it had in years. The children moved between homes comfortably, carrying their backpacks with pride instead of confusion. My house was no longer silent, and my daughter's home was no longer rigid with tension. Instead of separation, we had structure. Instead of control, we had communication. One afternoon, I received a call from the school principal inviting both of us to attend a recognition ceremony for Jake. He had improved significantly in his grades and behavior. The invitation listed both parents and guardians. When my daughter saw my name included, she paused for a moment before smiling. "Of course you should come," she said. At the ceremony, I sat beside her in the front row. When Jake's name was called, he walked confidently toward the stage. As he accepted his certificate, he looked directly at us and waved. In that moment, I realized how much stability had influenced him. Children thrive where cooperation exists. After the event, several parents approached us, commenting on how involved we both were. They admired the teamwork. It was a subtle reminder that family disagreements do not have to define the future. Later that evening, my daughter and I discussed long-term plans. We talked about education goals, saving strategies, and emotional support systems. She expressed interest in understanding how I had managed finances independently for so long. I offered to teach her budgeting principles, the same discipline that allowed me to fund the children's education quietly. Sharing knowledge felt different from defending decisions. It built trust rather than tension. She began asking for advice more often, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. That shift marked real progress. One night, while reviewing future plans, she admitted something important. "When I first asked you to step back," she said carefully, "I thought I was protecting everyone. But I realize now I was reacting, not planning." I appreciated her honesty. "We all react sometimes," I replied. "What matters is how we correct it." Her willingness to reflect showed growth. Our relationship transformed from authority versus resistance into partnership. Boundaries were respected, but involvement was encouraged. The grandchildren benefited from stability, and we benefited from mutual understanding. I also noticed something within myself changing. I no longer felt the urgency of proving anything. Instead, I felt grounded. I had demonstrated my capability without hostility. That realization gave me peace. The children continued excelling academically and socially. Their confidence increased, partly because they saw adults cooperating instead of competing. They understood that disagreements can be resolved without breaking relationships. One evening, Jake asked if he could help me in the kitchen. As we worked together, he told me he felt lucky to have two homes filled with love. His words confirmed that reconciliation was not just about adults, it shaped the emotional foundation of the next generation. Looking back, the moment they took the children away no longer felt like defeat. It felt like a turning point. A difficult one, but necessary. Without that interruption, we might never have communicated openly. What began as exclusion had transformed into inclusion. What started as doubt had become dialogue. And through patience, truth, and consistent action, our family found a stronger balance than before. With time, the story of our family began to change, not just inside our home, but in how we saw each other publicly and privately. The tension that once filled every conversation slowly faded, replaced by respectful dialogue. My daughter started involving me in important decisions early instead of informing me afterward. That simple change made a significant difference. One afternoon, she invited me to attend a meeting with her about the children's long-term academic plans. This time, I wasn't there to defend myself. I was there as a valued participant. We discussed future schooling options, extracurricular activities, and saving strategies. She listened carefully when I shared insights from years of experience managing responsibilities alone. During the meeting, I realized something important. The conflict had not been about capability, it had been about communication. When assumptions replace conversation, misunderstandings grow. But when people sit down and talk honestly, solutions appear. After the meeting, my daughter admitted she had been embarrassed to ask for help before. She believed that as an adult, she needed to handle everything independently. I explained that independence does not mean isolation. Asking for guidance is not weakness, it is wisdom. That conversation marked another turning point. She began to appreciate that collaboration strengthened our family rather than weakened it. Instead of feeling replaced, she felt supported. Meanwhile, the grandchildren thrived. Their grades improved, and their confidence became noticeable. Teachers commented on their focus and emotional stability. I attended school events regularly, but now as part of a team rather than as someone trying to regain access. One evening, while reviewing homework with Jake, he asked why adults sometimes argue. His question was simple, but it carried depth. I told him that disagreements happen when people care deeply but express themselves poorly. I emphasized that what truly matters is how we repair those disagreements afterward. He nodded thoughtfully, then said he was happy we fixed ours. That statement touched me more than any apology could have. Over dinner that night, my daughter reflected on how close we had come to permanent distance. She admitted that if I had responded with anger or retaliation, the outcome could have been worse. Instead, patience allowed healing. I acknowledged that I had felt hurt, but I also understood that reacting emotionally would not have solved anything. By staying calm and presenting facts, I gave the situation room to improve. Gradually, trust returned in full. Not because the past was forgotten, but because it was addressed openly. Our home environment became lighter. Conversations were longer. Decisions were shared. The grandchildren now moved comfortably between both houses, understanding that love existed in each space. They no longer sensed division. Instead, they experienced unity. Looking back at the moment they were taken away, I recognized how much growth had emerged from that difficult experience. It forced us to confront weaknesses in communication and assumptions in perception. The separation that once felt like rejection ultimately became an opportunity for growth and clarity. Through honesty and cooperation, we rebuilt what had been strained. And this time, it was stronger, not based on control, but on mutual respect. In the months that followed, our family found a rhythm that felt natural rather than forced. The past no longer controlled every conversation. Instead of revisiting the pain, we focused on building stability for the children. My daughter and I agreed that transparency would always come first. Decisions regarding the grandchildren would be discussed openly, not assumed. That agreement alone removed the fear that had once divided us. I continued attending school meetings, but now with shared understanding. When financial matters arose, we reviewed them together. The payments I had made in silence were no longer a secret. My daughter expressed gratitude for my long-term commitment, and she took steps to ensure future expenses were managed jointly. It was no longer about who contributed more. It was about ensuring consistency for the children. Jake and Emma noticed the change quickly. Children are sensitive to emotional shifts. They no longer sense tension when moving between homes. Instead, they experienced collaboration. Homework sessions became shared efforts. Bedtime stories were sometimes read by me, sometimes by their mother, and sometimes together. The stability they needed came not from one location, but from unity between the adults who cared for them. One evening, while sitting on the porch watching the sunset, my daughter turned to me and said she was proud of how we handled the situation. She admitted that she had feared confrontation at first. She worried that reopening discussions would lead to more conflict. Instead, it led to clarity. She realized that honest communication prevented misunderstandings from growing into permanent separation. I told her that pride was not necessary. Growth was enough. What mattered was that we learned from the experience. She smiled and agreed. That conversation felt lighter than any we had shared before. As time passed, our relationship strengthened in ways neither of us expected. The grandchildren flourished academically and emotionally. Teachers continued to praise their improvement. They participated confidently in school activities, knowing that their family stood united behind them. That confidence reflected the environment we had rebuilt. I also noticed personal growth within myself. The experience taught me patience beyond what I thought I possessed. It reminded me that influence does not always require authority. Sometimes, steady presence is more powerful than argument. By remaining calm, consistent, and truthful, I allowed facts to speak for themselves. Neighbors who once heard rumors about the separation now saw us together at community gatherings. They noticed cooperation instead of conflict. I never felt the need to explain every detail publicly. Our actions demonstrated the outcome better than words ever could. One afternoon, my daughter surprised me with a small family dinner to celebrate Jake's academic progress. During the gathering, she thanked me publicly for my years of dedication. Hearing those words in front of the children carried deep meaning. It was not about acknowledgement, but about recognition of truth. Jake stood up during the dinner and hugged me tightly. He said he was grateful that adults solved their problems instead of letting pride win. His simple observation reminded me that children learn more from behavior than from speeches. That night, as the house grew quiet, I reflected on everything that had happened. What began as a painful removal had transformed into an opportunity for understanding. The separation had forced conversations we might never have had otherwise. It challenged assumptions and encouraged transparency. The grandchildren were never truly taken away from me. There was a temporary distance, yes, but not a permanent loss. Through patience, truth, and cooperation, we rebuilt trust. The foundation of our family became stronger because it was tested. Looking forward, I felt confident in our future. Not because everything was perfect, but because we now had the tools to handle disagreements properly. Communication replaced assumption. Partnership replaced control. Respect replaced doubt. And in that transformation, I found something greater than victory. I found reconciliation, stability, and renewed connection. Our family story was no longer defined by separation. It was defined by growth.